And Amy, well, tonight we have noted military historian and geopolitical expert Matt Lauer. Fresh off his interview of Beyonce.
He didn't want to get left out of the party.
Yeah. He is, that deep thinker will be the interviewer of the two presidential candidates, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, separately, one at a time, not a forum, where they will talk about national security and other commander-in-chief related responsibilities.
And what's nice is the audience is going to be full of active military members who are going to be able to ask questions once the great one, Matt Lauer, is done asking questions.
Will Bo Bergdahl get a question?
I don't think.
I wonder. For the cheat sheet on tonight's event, what questions should be asked of Hillary, that probably won't be by Matt Lauer, what answers should be given by Donald Trump, which may happen. We're now joined by our friend KT McFarland, Fox News national security analyst. KT, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning.
So here's my assessment. You tell me how I'm wrong. My assessment in terms of what the two candidates have to deal with tonight in terms of the hurdles they have to clear. For Donald Trump, he really just has to demonstrate proper temperament. And for Hillary Clinton, she has to rewrite history, so she's got the tougher job.
Yeah, I think the bar is higher for her. People assume she knows all about this stuff. People assume Trump doesn't. And then there's the people assume she's a crook, and people sadly assume he's crazy. So she's not going to tell anybody and prove that she's not lying. That's already sort of baked in the cake. He just has to show, like Reagan did in 1980, that he's not crazy.
Now, do you think that Hillary Clinton's going to answer any questions about what happened in Benghazi?
Yeah.
Because you know that's coming. If not from Matt Lauer, it should be from somebody, an active duty military member in the audience.
Yeah, and I think that what I'm looking for tonight is sort of two sets of questions. One, going forward, how do you see the use of force? When is America going to go to war? How do you see the defense budget? Where do you see it? Do you see us increasing defense spending? How do you see our alliances? Where do you think America's role is in the Middle East, in Europe, and in Asia? How are you going to deal with Vladimir Putin? And then there's a second set of questions, primarily directed at Mrs. Clinton, because she's the one that's running on her quote record. Tell us about that reset with Russia. That didn't work.
Yeah.
Tell us about the Middle East. You were in favor of the Iran nuclear deal. You bragged that your actions had brought Iran to the table, but Iran's violating that deal. Explain to us what these planeloads of cash are doing going to Iran. And then, most importantly, tell us how is it that you got all those decisions wrong? You wanted to go into Iraq, which we've seen now probably wasn't the right idea. But then you wanted to get out. And then we've seen as well, that's not the right idea. You wanted to go into Libya. We've seen, sadly, tragically, that the result of that is jihadi chaos in Benghazi. So I think she's got more to answer to. And so I think, Dan, I think you're right. Hers is the harder job.
And also, she has some details to fill in terms of thinking prospectively, like you're talking about, with regards to a national security area, which is immigration policy. Trump laid out a 10-plank platform in Phoenix last week after visiting with the Mexican president. She has said, very little on the topic other than a quadrupling down on President Obama's Syrian refugee program.
Yeah, and interestingly, when Trump gave his big terrorism speech 2 or 3 weeks ago, I thought he did something that very few, whether Hillary Clinton or others, very few have done. First of all, he made the connection between the problems in the Middle East and the threat to the homeland. Now, how is immigration, how is the threat to the homeland related to what's happening in the Middle East? And secondly, he approached it unlike a lot of people do, where they're constantly asked, would you put boots on the ground? How many boots would you put on the ground? Whose boots would you put on the ground? He cast it in a much bigger perspective. He said that radical Islam is the same kind of global approach that we need and threatens us the same way communism did during the Cold War and fascism did during World War II. We had a concerted effort to do that, not just a military effort, but an ideological effort. We had an economic effort. We had allies. Sometimes we had to hold our noses to deal with allies because we were united against a common enemy. So, again, I think that even though Hillary Clinton has with all the big resume and all the experience, it hasn't been a very successful resume. And a lot of her initiatives, in fact, most of her initiatives have not been successful.
How important do you think that visit with Mexican President Pena Nieto was for Donald Trump, and then Hillary's reaction to it, suggesting that she has no plans to accept the Mexican president's overture after Trump, quote unquote, made a spectacle of himself. What's your assessment of that interchange between Pena Nieto and Trump, that meeting and its importance, and then Hillary's decision not to follow suit?
Well, I think for Trump, it was a very successful trip because all of a sudden you could see him in the role of commander-in-chief, and his remarks and his demeanor and the way he was treated, I think, went a long way for that. Hillary Clinton doesn't have to prove that to anybody. But secondly, the thing about the meeting that Mr. Trump had with the Mexican president that nobody's talked about is, a month ago, the Mexican president, as well as former Mexican officials and former Mexican president, were all saying, no wall, there's never going to be a wall. After that meeting, it was like everybody accepted that it was going to be a wall. Mexican president referred to it. They just disagreed on how to pay for it and who was going to pay for it. Now, to me, that's never been an important issue, who pays for the wall. You pay for the wall by charging everybody $1 when they come across the border. You take the drug cartel money, use that to pay for the wall. The more important issue is that you have a wall, that you have a way of controlling your borders. And as Trump has said, I'm going to build a wall, big, beautiful wall, but it's going to have a big door. Somebody is finally willing to take on the immigration issue because the Republicans in the past have talked about it, the Democrats have talked about it, but they just keep kicking the can down the road.
But do you think one of the solutions that Trump offered was self-deportation? Do you really think that's going to work?
If you look at sort of where the numbers have gone in the last several years, the flow of immigration into the illegal immigration in the United States has slowed from Mexico has slowed down. It has increased from Central America, from South America. And so I'm not really sure how realistic that is. But when I look at the solution to the problem, I've always thought, there's not one size fits all here. Let's just look at who are the illegal immigrants into the United States, and let's start peeling the onion. Well, the ones who are convicted of crimes, we don't want you. Go back. The ones who are not participating and contributing to society in the United States, there's a question mark. But the ones who have been here since right after they were born, they're hardworking, their kids get scholarships to Harvard because they have perfect records. Well, let's have another conversation about that. But I can tell you, having been in the Reagan administration, when President Reagan was dealing with the same issue, the numbers were smaller, but it was the same issue. It was supposed to be a two-part thing. He would grant amnesty, but before he granted amnesty, he would build the wall. They never built the wall. They granted the amnesty, and the problem just increased because without securing the border, it's like pouring water in a bucket with a big hole at the bottom.
Also tonight occurs against the backdrop of this story out of Paris this morning, a car loaded with cooking gas canisters found near the French capital's Notre Dame Cathedral. That occurred Sunday morning, according to police. They're interviewing the two owners of that car, one of whom is on the national security watch list in France. So it just revisits the issue after the spat of attacks in the last year of radical Islamic terrorism or political Islamist terrorism, the descriptor of your choice, and how the Obama administration, with Clinton as their top foreign policy official, got ISIS so wrong.
Well, anybody can look at the last 15 years, and I lay blame as well at the Bush administration. We've been battling this for radical Islamic jihad and terrorism for 15 years, and we've yet to figure out the right answer. President Bush wanted to fight him over there, so we didn't have to fight him over here. Well, we tried. We didn't stop it. We didn't destroy it completely. And it's, in fact, come back and sort of morphed and modified and mutated, and it's in more places. Then President Obama came in and said, well, I'm withdrawing from the region. The problem is us, not radical Islam. And so then radical Islam went on steroids. And so ISIS, for example, has now opened a second front in Europe. But the number of radical Islamic groups, it's not just ISIS, it's way bigger than ISIS. It's all of the various witches' brew of Islamic jihadists, radical Islamic groups who want to take over the world and destroy Western civilization. And if they have to die in the process, sign me up, strap on a suicide vest. And I really feel that after 15 years of banging our head against the wall, we need a different plan. And we need a different plan soon and fast, because once those groups get their hands on weapons of mass destruction, game over.
All right. She is KT McFarland, Fox News national security analyst. KT, thank you for joining us and providing your insights. As always, appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you. And she joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.